Welcome to this episode of Sexuality After. I'm here today with Liesl Hays. She is an entrepreneur, a blogger, and an author. She has a book coming out soon called Broken, Changed, and Rearranged, which I love the title, by the way.
Thank you.
When is it coming out?
It's actually the ebook is going to be released in September, and then the actual physical copies will be in bookstores in early December.
Nice. So exciting. Just in time for Christmas.
Yes, just in time for Christmas and the evolution in January that we all so desperately crave.
Yes, exactly. Nice. And you, from what I can tell so far, you teach people in your book about going to the depths of life and the darkness of life and how to rise from it. And you also talk about owning your own story and learning how to listen to your inner voice. Something I love that you said was that you show up as your whole self and you invite others to do the same, which is very powerful. I really love that.
And it's hard sometimes, it's like, but at the same time, when we show up as our whole selves, it's like we do invite other people to do that with us. And I think that at the core, we all crave that.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Yes.
We all crave authenticity deep down, which is just very scary to be authentic and to go there.
It's hard in practice.
Yeah, but it's also hard to not be authentic. So you kind of
It
choose
is
your hard.
also equally as stifling. You are so right.
Yep. Cool. Well, I would love to hear about your childhood growing up and the two or three main beliefs that you grew up with around your sex and sexuality. And we'll go from there.
Okay, so core beliefs around my sex and sexuality that really started in childhood. So I went to Catholic school, and my parents were both very communicative about being virgins when they got married. That was a core belief and a core value that they both held. And again, more power to them. Like, that's a fantastic belief if that is what you choose and what works for your life. However, that belief for me was very much communicated through the church that I went to. It was very much communicated through, any courses that I took on sexuality. I mean, sexuality courses in Catholic school were like taught by the priest. It was really awkward, Phoebe. But, my core beliefs around sexuality really stemmed from that. So I very much believed that sex was only for marriage. It was only to be enjoyed within that covenant and that promise. And ultimately, like, any form of self-exploration was not acceptable, right? Like, masturbating was not acceptable. Exploring oneself was not acceptable. That was all for a later date.
Yeah.
So for me, like, what I learned about sexuality is that it's something that's going to happen way out in the future when you eventually get married, and any form of exploration leading up to that point is like just off limits. So don't think about sex. If you think about sex, try and think about something else. Don't explore. And yeah, it was just it was a very prescribed way of thinking. And I know that you can relate to this.
Yeah. It wasn't presented as your choice. It was presented as this is what you should do. This is the right thing to do. And did you experience a lot of guilt and shame around that as well, about like being a sexual person?
Definitely. I experienced a lot of shame and guilt around my sexuality. And, I was also very much taught, like, later in college. I actually joined a Baptist church, and I felt like my role as a woman was just to cover my body, that men could not control themselves, that they ultimately, like, could not be trusted. And, like, I remember this modesty fashion show that we went to where they talked about, like, the canvas bag in the middle of your chest, like potentially causing men to stumble. And I just remember being afraid of my sexuality, right? Like I was
Yeah.
afraid that no matter how I looked or how I presented myself, that I was
Yeah.
going to cause men to sin. Like
Yeah.
that's how I felt. And so I felt very locked up and I was afraid of sex. Really for the majority of my life and even into my marriage.
Totally.
Yeah.
How did that, the way you were raised, how did that influence, your dating life and going into marriage and after marriage? Like, what did that look like? How did that play out?
So, when I was in college, I was very much involved in the Baptist church and then even in my early 20s as well. And so, we just didn't really date. I mean, i- if we did date, it was we went to church with someone, we went to coffee shops with them. And, I think the hardest thing, Phoebe, was the shame that I felt around sex. Um, it was mirrored that the person that I was with was also felt shame around sex, right? Because I dated people who were very much in that world with me. And so anytime we would slip up and something physical would happen, like we would both just feel shame around it, right? It's if anything ever led past kissing, it was like, oh my gosh, we have to pray about this. Like we have to like figure out how to control ourselves. Like we can't do this until we're married. And so anytime I would slip up or we would slip up, but I mostly felt responsible for whatever reason.
Yep.
It would we'd have to like ask for forgiveness and figure out like how to amend what we had done.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
So much guilt, like crushing guilt all the time about
Oh
everything
much.
sexual.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And then when you got married, if you feel comfortable talking about it, like, could you just shift easily out of that guilt or feeling of like, is this dirty? Or I don't know, how did that work for you?
You so know the answer to this question because you've experienced it too, but it's almost impossible to shift. I mean, it's not impossible, but it was hard to shift because ultimately you can't just like turn or push a button and have an expectation that this just years of the way that you have been taught and learned about sex, now all those things are okay to be enjoyed in marriage, right? And so it's hard because you still it's just hard to undo all the things that you believe to show up as your whole self in a sexual relationship that's now deemed okay, right?
Yeah.
When it wasn't okay before.
Yes, sex is dirty and sinful, and lust is very dangerous and only to be shared with, the person you love the most in the world. And then it's beautiful. It's like,
Yes, right? Because that's not a mind game at all.
right.
Right.
So, what started your shift around that, around your sexuality, around your beliefs? I'm not sure where you are now with everything, but what started it?
It started first as my emotional healing.
Mm.
And, I talk about in my book the point where I was really broken in my life. Like I was working 60 hours a week, had two small kids, tried to do all the things and achieve all the things and be everything to everyone. And eventually, I actually had an affair with a coworker at work. And it came out to my boss and it came out to my husband. And that was the catalyst for my growth and healing. It was a rock bottom moment, but I realized like, this is not the person I want to show up as.
Yep.
Like, this is not her. This is not who I want to be. And I started doing a lot of emotional work and undoing a lot of the core values and beliefs that I held internally. And that started to help me recognize that, like, there's this emotional self that I am, but there's also this physical self. And these two things have to be, for me, it was emotional healing first, which has really started this journey for me around sexual healing that's
Hmm.
really still in process for me.
Yeah.
But this foundational work, like, oh my gosh, Phoebe, it has laid the foundation for me to be able to be open sexually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of those main beliefs that you healed emotionally?
So one of the main beliefs that I carried around, I call them toxic truths. That's just my version
Yep.
of beliefs that aren't great for my well-being. So the first one is that nothing inside of me is good.
Hmm.
There's nothing about me that is good. Everything about me that is good comes from God or it comes from Jesus. And so I need to like lock this person up because she can't be trusted
Yep.
and I can't listen to her. I need to listen to God. I need to listen to people outside of myself for advice and wisdom. So that was core toxic belief number one. One of, yes,
Yes.
I know you're nodding.
Okay. I just want to say, like, that resonates with me so much. That is probably the main belief that has carried over into kind of every area of my life that I have also had to overcome is you're just like dirt, like sinful, and everything that's human is wrong. And the less like yourself you are, and the more like Jesus you are, the better. And heaven forbid, literally, you trust yourself or listen to yourself because, your thoughts are lower than God's thoughts. And it has been years of me learning how to trust myself and to trust myself in trusting myself, if that makes sense.
Oh, Phoebe, it makes so much sense.
Yeah. And you're always like, not enough, or you're too much. You're like too human, or you're too sinful, or you're too something. It's like never the right amount. And it really comes out in every area of my life. It's crazy and excruciatingly frustrating. Yeah. I'm sure you come across it when like you heal it in some areas or to a certain extent, and then you grow as a person, right? You expand into like a new layer of being, and then you're like, ah, crap, there it is again. So now I
Yeah.
have to heal it in this area or in this way.
Yes.
And then you're like, grow past
Totally.
that. And then you're like, ah, there it is again.
Yes, totally. Because I don't even know if you recognize, like you said, Phoebe, it's such a deep held belief that's reinforced. I think for both of us, that was reinforced in so many areas of our
Yes.
lives that later we're like, oh God, like it's there too. And I didn't even know it was there.
Yes.
And now, like you said, I have to do the hard work again around how am I flipping that narrative to something that helps me show up in a more full, beautiful, alive way. And it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yes. I do find that it gets easier. Like the more that I do it, for starters, at the beginning, it was the most scary. It was really terrifying to take the first few steps towards trusting myself and to trust that it was a good idea to trust myself. And just learning about that whole process. That took a while just to take the first few steps. But then the more you do it, the more you see, oh, this brings me life. It brings me joy. It brings me fulfillment. Okay. All right, let's do this a little bit more, a little bit more. And then as you go along, you build up the tools, as you know, that you can access easier and easier. So I think it does get easier over time to face those things, but it's a process getting there.
Yeah, it is. And I love what you just said because I resonate with this. Like, I remember after crisis. So, one of my other core beliefs is to be selfless, like toxic
Hmm.
truths.
Yes.
Be a selfless woman. Put everyone's needs before your own. Put yourself last. that is what makes for a great woman, is she's a selfless person.
Yep.
And I remember the first time after crisis, like examining and asking myself the question, what do I even like? Like that was a terrifying question for me because I didn't know what I liked outside of the people that existed around me. And I remember starting to do things by myself, just totally by myself. I'd be like, I remember going down to a wine store in downtown Lee Summit, which is where I live. And I told my husband, I was like, I'm just going to go on an expedition and I'm just going to figure out the stuff that I actually like. And I sat in that wine store and I had a glass of Pinot Noir. And one, it was really hard for me to be alone. But two, I was like, I had to determine, do I even like this thing by myself? Like, is this something that I would even like to do without other people? And I remember that was one of the first things where I was like, I like red wine. And I like sitting with myself, like here in this moment alone. And I had to slowly put together a series of those things to even be able to really have an identity, because my identity for so long was in other people that I didn't even know what the heck I liked.
Yes,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
Um, my psychologist at the time gave me the homework to write down 100 things that I liked or disliked. That's really hard.
Yeah.
But it really made me think and it really made me see who I am as a person. And I've made quite a few lists like that since to try to figure out who I am. Like, what do I value in myself and others to try to figure out my main core values, right? Or what do I want? Like, that's such a powerful question that I talk about all the time. Because how are you going to get anywhere you want to be if you don't even know where that is? So, what do I want? What do I want for myself? What do I want for my life? What do I want? That's kind of comes after figuring out what you like and don't like. And I've written lists of what makes me happy. What do I know for sure? Taking on Oprah's question of what do I know for sure? Things like that. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I love that question too. The Oprah question's a good one. What do I know for sure in this moment? It's a good question.
Yeah, that was a really powerful one for me to kind of claim back my power from religion because, as I'm sure you know, when you go through all the conditioning that you get, it's like everything that you've based your entire life on, everything that you thought meant something, anything, like every aspect of your life, all of a sudden the base of it is just crumbling out from underneath you. And it's like you have nothing to stand on. It's such a discombobulating feeling. And that really helped me to see, there are some things that I know for sure. And then to feel that feeling of like, when I know this for sure, this is how it feels in my body. And this is where my truth is, like in my body. This is what it feels like. It's really powerful.
That is a really powerful exercise. I think it was one of the things I started when I recognized like my emotional body and this physical body are intertwined, because I I say this, actually I stole this from Glennon Doyle. It's one of my favorite things she said. I voted my body off the island like a long time ago, right? Like
Yes.
I just voted her off. Like she was, I could not, sexuality to me, my physical body, even paying attention to how my body is feeling were just foreign concepts. And so starting to recognize like when I am at peace or when I know I'm making the right decision and I'm listening to like my true inner voice, what does that feel like in my body was a really important first step to start to, marry again this emotional Liesl and this physical Liesl who are very much intertwined. But I voted the physical Liesl off the island, right? Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so when you started bringing those 2 together, how did that impact your sex life?
Dramatically. Like, so for a very long time, I would say that even sex in marriage for me felt like just something like I don't know if I was always very present. Like it was just like this is the thing that we have to do. Like it's more about him than it is me, but he didn't feel that way, which is so funny. He's like been such a critical part of the healing for me. But for me, it was like, let's just like this is a thing that we do like once a week. Like that's what we're supposed to do. And then like I just check that off my to-do list, right? Like
Yep.
it's done. I don't have to think about it anymore. And when I started to like channel in this physical part of just who I am, and it's not just sex, but sex is a
Yeah,
part of it, right? It's
yeah,
just the acknowledgement of being in my skin and recognizing, how what sensations I'm feeling in my body. It allowed me to start to like show up during sex. So I had been practicing for so long showing up emotionally, but I hadn't been practicing showing up physically. And sex is both, right? It's the spiritual, it's the emotional, and it's the physically being present. And I remember asking myself the same questions, Phoebe, like that I'd ask my emotional self, like, what do I like sexually? I don't even know.
yes.
I don't know. I've never really explored anything like
Yeah.
exploring anything on my own feels dirty. And then I have a spouse who's like, yeah, that's what, like, how do you know what you like? Like, he's on the opposite end where he's like, I don't even understand that. He's like, I respect that. But he's like, I don't understand that. He's like, you have to figure out what you like. I mean, I was even at the place where I felt like self exploration was like cheating.
Yeah.
That was like what I had set there to my husband being able to say, "Oh my gosh, honey, like that's so normal. Like that's what you're supposed to
Mm,
do.
yeah.
So like go figure that out and come back. Like we're good. Like we'll," which I loved, like
Oh, so
he's been like
great.
such an important part of like that healing for me.
Yeah.
Um which has been good.
So beautiful to have such a supportive partner.
Totally.
Yeah, mine has also been a huge part of my healing in much the same
That's
way.
awesome.
Yeah, and, okay, so I'm really glad you brought that up because, like, that's very similar to me as well, is I had to just kinda start from ground zero and be like, "What do I like? What touches do I like?" Because I was just taught that my sexual pleasure existed for my husband or the man that I was with, and it was like my duty to satisfy him or I don't know, like I existed for him kind of.
Yes,
Just
totally.
kind of the underlying message that you get often in religious upbringings, especially with masturbating being such a like no thing. Your sexuality is not your own. It belongs after marriage. Like everything is after marriage. It's not like there's so many reasons why we've come to these beliefs, right? These deep conditionings. And yeah, just asking, what do I want right now in bed? And even before when you're self pleasuring, do I like this? Do I like this? What does this feel like to me? Do I want to explore this? And being able to accept that in yourself, I don't know.
And like, I don't think you realize it. I mean, I think I realized it in adolescence when I would have people who didn't have religious upbringings and they would say things like, you don't, you don't ever masturbate? Like, that's not a thing you do. And I'm like, no, that's not a thing I do. Like, women don't do that, do they? Like, I just remember there's this area of adolescence that's meant for sexual exploration, right? Like you're figuring out who you are. It's the
Yeah.
same with emotional exploration as at that age. You're figuring out who you are. You're figuring out what you enjoy. You try on different hats or ways of being,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like, I remember I dressed like a skater for like a couple months and then realized
Yeah.
like that wasn't really my jam. I didn't like the Converse shoes and like the carpenter jeans. Like I just didn't, right? But in that adolescent phase, we are meant to explore who we are and try on different things to eventually be able to land on like, this is what I like. This is maybe what I don't like. And I think I did that in some areas of my life, but in sexuality, that was like a no-no, right? Like it was just a no-no. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you started doing this in your marriage, so for starters, it was awesome that your husband was so supportive of that as well. And tell me, like, talk to me a little bit about masturbation within marriage, because that's not something that people talk about a lot. Self-pleasuring yourself, like each your your own self when you're married seems to be a big no-no or just not something people talk about. Like my husband and I really support each other with that. And it really helps our relationship. It helps our sex life. It helps us to take responsibility for our own sexual fulfillment. And so there's like a lot less, I don't know, there's a lot less resentment. We're able to hold each other's sexual fulfillment more loosely or more like it's not like you need to fulfill me. You need to have sex as much as I want to have sex because it's my needs. It's like we both take responsibility for our own needs, and masturbation is a part of that, right? So,
Yes.
how do you find that self-pleasuring has changed your sex life?
Okay. So I'm going to parallel this to an emotional lesson I
Please
learned
do.
that I think, and then I'll go back to the physical, but
Yes,
I think it's
absolutely.
helpful. So we as women, as men, as all of us, we do not expect one person to fulfill all of our emotional needs. It's not possible, right? Like it would be, how ridiculous would we sound if we said to ourselves, well, I only have date nights with my husband. I only hang out with my husband. Like we get our emotional needs fulfilled by listening to or having conversations with our best friends, by going to events. Like we get our emotional needs fulfilled in a variety of ways. And so for me, I transitioned that over into my sex life. Like while my husband is my only sexual partner, at the end of the day, like we have the conversation around, like we are sexual beings and you're not the only person that like can fulfill all of my sexual needs, right? And exploration is such a big part of it. And I'm still working on this one, Phoebe. I'm like working it out in my head, in my mind, because I still feel shame around masturbation. It's like even hard for me to say that word. But like Harlan and I, my husband and I, have had really good conversations about this where he's like, I want you to learn about yourself. Like, I want you to explore yourself. And he's like, and I'm hopeful that, like, when you figure out the things that you like that you'll bring that into our sexual relationship too. So I'm working on that one and I haven't completely, like, fully grasped the beauty in that, but I know I'm on the journey and I'm starting to feel less shame about it. But I still feel some shame in self exploration. But I'm slowly moving past it.
Yeah, it's totally a process.
Yeah,
It's a process
totally.
for me too. Yeah. Even
What do
like
you
even though
what
I
do you
talk
think
about
has
this all the
helped
time, it's
you?
like I still deal with it on a regular
So
basis. So,
do you mind if I ask you, like, what has helped for you in that? Like in your relationship with your partner?
with shame, you mean?
Yeah, with shame and like with you both being okay with your sexual relationship also including masturbation.
Yeah, that's a big, that's a
I
big question.
know, I know.
It was a really big process because he like he really valued masturbating, and it meets like different needs for him than having sex. It's more like exploration and personal time, but it's not as deeply emotional as sex. Like one doesn't replace the other really. Like they're just kind of very different kettles of fish.
Hmm.
And I really struggled with that a lot for a long time because I felt like, well, he just, like, I'm not, again, I went to like the I'm not enough or I'm too much or something's wrong with me because he wants to masturbate. But the more that I healed my emotional self, my emotional wounds of not being enough and being the right amount and learning that I'm desirable, like all on my own, like meeting that it was like he was the only person or the only part in my life that gave my desirability credence. And so once I started finding that in other places, like myself, I could let go of that and be like, oh, okay, he still finds me desirable. It's not that he doesn't. And we have amazing sex. It's that he also likes this other thing. And then when I started exploring my own pleasure, that changed it drastically, where I was like, oh, I get it. Like self pleasure is different. And I can meet my own needs in like a different way than having sex. Like it's a very different thing. And then I started filling up my own pleasure bucket, so to speak, or my own um I don't know, like I started getting in touch with my lust myself, and my body myself, my pleasure, and started filling myself up like you were talking about. When you get your needs met in a few different places, it doesn't all just have to hinge on this one person and what they're doing or not doing or anything like that. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't feel like I'm explaining it very
No,
well,
no, 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 no. It made a lot of sense. And I felt like, because I'm still on the journey, like my rambling didn't make sense, but we're all in the exact place we're meant to be. But one of the things that you really said that resonated with me is you talked about your own pleasure bucket. And I really do think that we are taught in religion that a man desiring someone else or our husband desiring someone else than us or having sexual impulses that don't include us is cheating.
yes. Yeah, totally.
And it's not a realistic expectation. Like my husband and I talk about this all the time. And we're just like, you know what? Just because we got married doesn't mean that all attraction dies.
Yeah.
And we are very honest with each other about who we find attractive, what we find attractive, because we feel this. I'm trying to think of the right word, but like we have this comfort in our relationship. Like we know that there is safety and that we're not going anywhere. And even though we've made this decision, like to be honest, it doesn't mean that like I'm going to leave my husband for someone that I find attractive, or it's just we understand that a real relationship is not just physical, it's emotional.
Yes,
Like
totally. It's a
it's
lot of
this
things.
it's so many things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your husband finding another person attractive is not like, oh, then our relationship is going to die.
It's
Because it's like, that is one very small aspect of our relationship. Like it encompasses so much.
right?
Yeah. We're the same. But not,
Yeah,
again, not everybody is like that or feels comfortable with that. And that's cool too. Like I
totally.
think it's just really important to talk with your partner about like, what does monogamy mean to you? What is cheating exactly? And get like really specific about it.
Totally. And it's the understanding the boundaries
Yep,
within your relationship. And those
totally.
boundaries are different for everyone. It's kind of like I said, I mean, if you really have a core value that like sex is meant for marriage and that sets you free and you find someone who's on the same page as you, like more power to you.
Yep.
My biggest thing is don't layer on the expectations, beliefs, thought processes of other people who aren't living your one precious life. So like if you dig deep down and you ask your wise inner voice like what makes you come alive, that is the foundation
Yeah.
for all of the beliefs that come out of you. And ultimately the greatest part about humanity is that we're all different people. So my beliefs are going to be different than yours and we can actually coexist at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we're all different. And that's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yes. I would love to hear a little bit more about what's helped you with shame to get to the point where you are now. So, one thing I wanted to mention before is that what's helped me the most with shame, I think, is a tool that I learned where basically you feel the shame in your body and then you project it out in front of you. And then you like have a conversation with it and you ask it, what do you want? What do you need? What are you here for? What are you trying to accomplish in my life? And basically, I've never met a part of myself that wasn't trying to protect me. So the shame that I feel around my sexuality is basically my internal police trying to make sure that I fit into the society or the group of people that it feels like I need belonging with, which is the group that I grew up with, because that's kind of where it comes from, is like my childhood beliefs. And so it just tries to make sure that I stay in that box that I was put in, right? So that I belong, so that I'm safe. So it has this good intention. It's misguided, but it's just trying to protect me. And so then when I realize that, then I can kind of deal with it a little bit more. And I can accept it and still find ways to feel safe while exploring and doing things that I previously would have felt a lot of shame about. And then when you do those things and you're like, oh, look, I'm doing this and I'm safe, like I'm masturbating and I'm feeling pleasure in my body and it's actually nothing's happening. I'm not getting struck down by lightning. There's not a hole opening up underneath me to swallow me to hell. Like this is actually okay. Nothing dangerous is happening. Then you can feel safer and less shame to do more. Right. So it's kind of a step-by-step process of like facing your shame and then pushing the limits a little bit and kind of progressing in that way.
But it's very much like our emotional exploration as well, right? It's like,
Yes.
okay, so I'm going to try this thing. I don't know if I like it. Maybe I don't like it, but I'm going to try it and determine like, does it fit? Does it fit for me? But it is hard because, like you said, there's this, I call it like the shame spiral, where I still sometimes get in my head around like trusting myself, because there is a core like toxic belief that is underneath that. But I've found that like one of the things that helps me is, so I actually named my inner voice. Her name is True North.
Nice.
She's legit.
Perfect.
So I try and I know when True North and I are in alignment, like I know what that feels like in my physical body. It feels freeing. It feels like there's no stress. Like it's like a Zen feeling, right? And it's funny because a lot of people ask me, well, yeah, okay, so you always just go with what True North and you like decide together. And I'm like, yeah, that is what I do.
Yeah.
And sometimes I said True North battles. That doesn't mean that True North doesn't sometimes present an opposing view, because she does. Like, she'll oftentimes be like, I don't know, have you thought about it this way? Like, are you going into a pattern or a belief that you are familiar with? Or like, is this step here maybe where you want to go? So like, I mean, True North and I battle it out a lot. And it isn't just this voice inside of me. I think a lot of times people are like, well, if you just do whatever you want, then like, how's that work out for you? And I'm like, no, True North and I are like aligned to these higher core values and goals and beauty that we want for our lives and the people that we love. And so we are like, we have conversations, like it is not just this I do whatever I want and whatever I please spirit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Phoebe, I don't even remember the question you asked me. I just got on my tangent about True North because she's the best.
Ooh, I was asking you about shame, but I love that you talked about True North. I have, yeah, I have similar inner voices. I have a couple of them, but yeah, it's not about just doing what's easy or just seeking pleasure in this moment. It's like everything is lined up with what you ultimately want in life, what you want for yourself and your children. It's lined up with your vision of the world. It's lined like the decisions or the choices that True North offers you are probably often not easy. Yeah.
That's a really good way to explain it though, because it is this worldview. Just because I listen to my inner voice, we still have very strong core beliefs and values. And those core beliefs and values they keep us healthy and they keep the people that we love and care about healthy. So it's not just about me, but it is as well. Like it's
Yeah.
both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the concept of there's a whole community of yous? So there's like the past yous, and there's the present you, and there's the you in 5 minutes, and the you a day from now, and a you 5 years from now, and there's the you 10 years from now, and 20 years from now. And so if you make a decision that's best for you, what you are you making that decision for? So I think when people think, oh, you just do what you want, they're thinking of like you in the present moment. But True North, or like these inner parts of us, the inner wisdom that we have, makes choices or tries to point us in the direction of taking choices that are best for all of our yous, like the whole community of yous. And then if you make a decision that's best for the you now and the you in 10 years and the you in 20 years, it's also best for like everybody around you in your community, because part of a healthy life in 10 years is having a strong community and strong relationships in your life, et
I've
cetera, et cetera.
never heard that, but like I love that thought process because it is foundationally. I think we have been taught often as women that like our way to love others is to be selfless martyrs towards the cause. And I've learned that I love my people best when I show up as my whole self and that I show them how to fight for this place of feeling alive and present. And like that's what's so important to me. But I actually love people better in that, but it starts with me, right? It's exactly like you said, it's the community of yous. It's yesterday and tomorrow and 5 minutes from now. And yeah, I love that analogy. That's really cool.
Yeah. And it's very true that, I mean, we're hearing this more and more. Women are having more and more of this conversation about like you actually have to put yourself first in some ways. And that looks different to different people, but like you have to make sure that you're meeting your own needs and that you're taking time to fill yourself up with like aliveness and juiciness and doing what you need to do in order to do that. Otherwise, everything suffers. Like, I'm a worse mom. I'm a worse wife. I'm a worse everything when I just am giving, giving, giving to everybody else except myself. And it's
And then, yeah,
it's
totally.
ironic and it's hard to balance.
It is. And
Yeah.
it's like when you live the other way for too long, and I talk about this a lot in the book, but for me, I had lived most of my adult life being what everybody else needed. And I willingly made that choice. Like I was the martyr. I was the martyr in my corporate life. I was the martyr in my family life. Like I was the selfless giver who did all the things for all the people. And everyone, I will tell you, Phoebe, in that point in my life, everyone liked me. I mean, literally everyone thought I was so great and amazing and incredible because I fit the mold. I fit
Yeah.
the mold of what every woman is supposed to achieve in life, which is being a selfless giver. And then, like 3 months, I mean, years of living that way. And I have an affair. I'm working 60 hours a week. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I enjoy. Don't know if I actually picked the life I was in or if somebody else picked it for me. And I was in crisis, like, because I lived that way for so freaking long. And I didn't know how to get out, but I sure as heck knew that my way out certainly couldn't be the way in that got me to this place. So like God and religion weren't really on the top of my list. But yeah, I just knew that like my way out had to look different.
Yep.
So yeah.
And so you became more selfish. What did that look like?
I mean, it started by very simply just asking myself the questions like, what do you even like? I
Yeah.
mean, I think that was my first part of exploration was, people would say, well, you have to prioritize yourself and your needs. And I'm like, God, I don't even know what my needs are. Like, I need to go
Yes.
further back
Yeah.
than all of your advice because I don't even know what I like. Like, I don't even know what I need. I can't even articulate that to therefore prioritize that. So that's where I had to start was
Yeah.
what do I even like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which led into you figuring out what your needs are and then being able to prioritize those more, make time for that, et cetera, et cetera.
And then it's like boundaries were a big thing too, but I didn't know how to set boundaries because I didn't even know what kept me healthy. But now, like, I know the things that keep me healthy and keep me centered. And so I can boundary myself around those things. And I feel like I'm teaching my children to do that now too, which
Yeah.
is freaking beautiful because I just hope my biggest thing for my children is I just hope that they get like 2 clicks further than where I was, maybe
Yeah.
hopefully more,
Yeah.
to be able to just like show up as their whole selves and also ask for what they need.
Yes. The
Yeah,
beautiful thing about healing is when we heal ourselves, we heal it for our children. And what you learn now, you can teach your children. Yeah. And most importantly, I think they see you living it out. So it just becomes second nature for them.
you're
I really
right.
believe that.
Leave it to.
That thought is something that can give me courage to explore uncomfortable things, um, and go to scary places. This is like, well, if I don't deal with this shit,
I
my kids are
know.
gonna have to.
Yeah.
So deep breath, here we go.
Yeah, it's such a good motivator though, like you said, because there's these tiny humans, and mine aren't so tiny anymore. They're actually in middle school, but they still are tiny humans. Like they're still
Yeah,
figuring out so many things. And when they emulate something that I do, okay, so for instance, one of the ones recently that I love, Phoebe. So I tell my children that in the morning, like from 5 a.m. to 6:50 a.m., that's my time. And a lot of people are like, that's crazy. You get up that early. Well, I go to bed at like 9. So there you go. And I get up super early. And from 5 a.m. until 6:50, they know is my time. So if they get up in between that window and they come downstairs, like I will reinforce the boundary of, grab whatever you need and then go up in your room and I'll come and get you at 6:50, like when it's time. And most recently, my daughter communicated to me, Mom, after school, she's an introvert and she's like, I get very overwhelmed. Like I have to be on all day with people. And she was like, so I was wondering if I can just have an hour after school in my room by myself where I don't do homework. And I was like, yes, you can. I'm like, and I love that you just asked for what you needed. And it's great because she goes upstairs, she gets her stuff. She doesn't want to talk to me after school. Gets her stuff, goes upstairs, spends an hour alone, and then she's ready to like tell me about her day. But it's so cool when you see your kids able to not just recognize what they need, but then to ask for it. Yes. And anyway, that was a huge win the other day. It just made me so happy.
That is a huge win. Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah. And the stuff we were talking about sexuality is the same, right? Like just the way that you communicate to your kids about it, like they'll be a step ahead or like 10 steps ahead of where you were growing up. And also, what's I going to say? Oh, it's gone now, but yeah, it's the same. The more that I am doing these podcasts and just learning about sexuality, the more I realize that it's totally just a mirror of our internal world. Really, like everything is a mixed bag within us. Like you can't like selectively heal. And like Brene Brown says, you can't selectively numb. You can't, like, everything affects everything inside of us.
My gosh, girl, I love that Brene Brown quote. Like, it's so good. You cannot numb like one emotion and not have it affect all of the others.
Yeah.
And I think that's how so often, and I talk about this in my book, I use her quote with that because I'm like, I got to the place where I lived my life in a world of like monotone gray. Like I didn't experience joy. I didn't experience sadness. Because I had numbed all the feelings for so long that I didn't feel anything. And I remember that being a very foreign feeling, like not feeling anything. But it's such an important reminder of also just why all the feelings are important, right? Sadness, joy, gratitude, whatever it is, it's so important that we allow ourselves to feel those feelings and not numb them. Yeah.
Pain, shame, disgust. With joy, bliss, pleasure. Yeah, you got to feel it all. Yeah, I really love that point that Brene Brown brings. I feel like that's one of her main points, that you can't selectively numb. Yeah. Okay. Let me look at the questions I wanted to ask you. Oh, yes. How does trusting your inner voice, your true north, play out sexually? Like in the moment, what does that look like? And I can share that for myself too, if you want.
Okay, no, it's a great question. So True North thinks that we are a sexual goddess, like literally she does. And I know this to be true. And it's something that I've recently like come to terms with. So one of the things that I'm really working on my physical self right now. And that's helping me show up sexually in my relationship with my husband. So I have been really, really focused on knowing that I'm a sexual goddess, look, I even blush when I say it, because I believe that like my husband is totally into me, and it's really just been my inability to like allow him to just admire me and love me fully, that is why I haven't been able to like show up sexually. Like I've even been the person who like, you know, throws the towel around myself when I'm in the bathroom because I'm like fearful, like, oh my gosh, if he sees me naked then we have to have sex, or you know, like there's a lot of shame encompassed there. And True North is challenging me in my physical and sexual relationship to just like show up emotionally and physically. And that makes us a sexual goddess, right? Like,
Yeah.
and also the other big thing I'm working on is not associating weight with my full beautiful self. Like I literally a couple of months ago just totally stopped weighing myself and decided what I was going to do was I was going to show up and I was going to treat my body in a way that was healthy and just like do that, right? And not focus on the scale. And I know by the way my clothes fit that I've gained weight, but I don't care, because being a sexual goddess is also knowing that like food is meant to be enjoyed. Experiences, life is meant to be freaking enjoyed. And when
Yeah.
we are in a world where we are constantly limiting ourselves and defining ourselves based on the way that we look, based on like deprivation and starvation to make my body look a certain way, like that is bullshit. And that is bullshit that so many of us have been fed. And I'm so done with it. Like, my husband doesn't need my body to look like a Victoria's Secret model. He really doesn't. Like, he wants me to show up as my full emotional and physical self. And that starts with me loving my own freaking body and taking care of it. Anyway,
Yes.
that's my tangent.
Yes, when we show up really as our whole selves and alive, that's what's sexy. Way sexier than a specific body type.
Even my husband said to me, he's like, I think you have it backwards in this sense. He's like, I just find confidence sexy.
Yeah, totally.
He's like, I find all different body types sexy. He was like, confidence, though, for me is like the unifying factor of just a woman being comfortable in their skin. And I'm like, I love that.
Yeah.
Because we're not all meant to look the same, right, Phoebe? Like, we're not all designed the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've experienced this either, but the more that I have loved my body and celebrated it for what it is, the more I can see beauty in other women and other body types. And that was actually partly my journey to discovering that I'm bi and that I like
Yeah.
women, is because
Yeah.
I started to appreciate and love my own body. Because I had this element of like disgust towards it before, because like in a way I liked my body, but it was never like never good enough. And
Yeah.
I just felt this sense of kind of disgust towards it because that's what I was taught. Like, is that your body is base and disgusting and sinful and yada, yada, yada. So healing that, I've grown to really appreciate and love other women's bodies more. And in turn, then also mine more.
Yeah. It's so good. Like, okay. So, for instance, Athleta, a brand I like, they started having, they really are representative of all different types of women anytime I go and shop there. And I remember the first time going online and I noticed the shift in that direction. And I remember at first feeling a little uncomfortable. Like, I was like, wait, like, where are all the skinny models? And we've been told for so long, like, what beauty should look like, that when we see something that doesn't fit that standard, we're immediately like, at least for me, I'm quick to dismiss it and being like, well, that's not pretty. That's not how women should look. They should look this way. And as I've learned, like you said, to love my own body and embrace all of its beauty, like I can go online with Athleta and I look at these women and I'm like, oh my gosh, she looks incredible in that outfit. Like, oh, she looks amazing. Like, and it doesn't matter the size, it doesn't matter their race. Like, it's just, I can admire different types of beauty because there are so many different types of beauty in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something, you know how we were talking a little bit ago about how you can't selectively numb. And if you start feeling, then you kind of have to feel the whole gambit of everything, and how our sexuality is, it's just like it's a mirror, or it's an aspect of who we are, and everything that we are inside impacts our sexuality and vice versa. Like everything kind of impacts everything within us. And then that also carries out to our family. Like our growth journey and our healing journey affects our children, like we were talking about, right? Us setting boundaries, us loving ourselves more really shows to our children how to do that. And our partner, it influences our partner. Like your growth, your healing emotionally has impacted your sexuality, and all of that impacts your partner, as we've talked about. And then it impacts our worldview. So, and I love that you brought that up too, because the more that we love ourselves and accept ourselves and our own bodies, the more we can love and accept and see the beauty in other people's bodies, like people we don't even know, right?
Yes.
Or the more that we can accept and love and celebrate our own sexuality, the more we can do that with other people, and we're less judgmental, and we're less, I don't know, turned off by other things, or I don't know, it really impacts. It's like ripples that go out.
Totally. And I actually, so the women that I have to really think for this worldview shift is actually Black women. So I've started following a lot of Black women, and they have like changed my paradigm in how I think about
Mm,
body image.
mm,
And they have like graciously showed up and, allowed a bunch of us white women in their space. And that's so freaking cool that they have extended a lot of their spaces
yeah,
to women like me, because I know that has been hard because there are some women who are not kind, right?
yep.
But what I love about it is, like, I don't know if you know who Rachel Cargill is, but oh my gosh, like when she posts pictures of herself like in a bikini, I'm just like, girl, you are just like confident and crushing it at life, and you like have embraced your body and you love your body. And they have just helped me understand and see how society has so much shaped how we feel about our bodies. And a lot of it is white women, right? Upholding a lot of those beliefs. And like they've just like shattered that glass ceiling for me to just be able to see things from a different perspective and understand that a lot of the history of body types is around like colonialism, right? And it just how wrong it is, but it also in their freedom, because they're truly oppressed, right? It's ushering in my freedom too around my body. So
Right.
I'm freaking grateful for those women. Like they're crushing it. Yeah, that's all I
That's
have.
beautiful. I love that. A
Yeah,
woman showing up in her truth and her fullness and her beauty and her confidence frees other women to do the same, and men. Yeah, frees everybody to do the same. Cool. Okay. Um, we are running out of time, so I just have a couple more questions for you
yes.
to end with. Um, what has been the most surprising thing you've learned about sex or sexuality as you've gotten older? We may have already covered this, but I wanted to ask you anyway.
So, going back to what you and I talked about, I learned that sex is also for me.
Yes.
Like, sex isn't just about my partner, and it isn't just about me like fulfilling an obligation because men have sexual needs and women don't. Like that was an old toxic truth that I held on to, and I've learned that sex is about the intersection of emotion and the physical, like coming together with another person.
Yeah.
And like both of us are players.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I teach a class on how to have more confidence in the bedroom. And that's one thing I talk about is like one of the main things coming in is getting clear on what you want. Like we talked about already, and knowing what your body likes, because then you can teach somebody else how to like rock your world. And that's super fun for everybody involved, right?
Yes.
And so when you're in that moment, you're like, what do I really want? Like, what do I really want right now? You know, what would really turn me on right now? Like, that's so fun for both people. Yeah.
And we forget that in healthy partnerships and in healthy relationships, both people desire that. Like both
Yes.
people want that, right? Like it's like you said, everybody wins.
Yeah. Because it's so fun to give pleasure. It's pleasureful to give pleasure and receive
Yes,
pleasure. And like the give and take of that is a million times more fun than just a one-way street.
totally.
Yeah. Mm, I love that. I would actually just trying to think in an interview a couple of days ago. I think that's what I said as well was the most surprising thing that I've learned about sex as I've gotten older. I think it was like the exact same words like you just
Oh,
said.
was it really?
I'm pretty sure. Um,
That's so funny.
yeah, but it's for me. Like my sexuality is first and foremost mine, and then it's for me to share with others who I want to share it with. Yeah, cool. What is one thing you wish you knew as a teenager about sex and sexuality?
There's so many things that it's okay to be a sexual being. Like that it's okay to be admired and looked at and not be afraid that like someone's gonna rape you or sin or like I wish that I just knew it was okay to show up that way at all because I spent most of my life covering myself up and being fearful that my sexuality was going to create a problem for someone else.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember this was actually only like probably 3 years ago that I wore shorts. Well, it was maybe a little bit longer than that, but it wasn't like a super long time ago that I wore shorts for the first time. And I remember walking down the street and being like, nobody's even looking at me. Like, it was so foreign because I was taught like I couldn't even show my shoulders, or anything. And if I did, like bad stuff would go down. And I was wearing like shorts and nobody even noticed. It was it was, like, so freeing. Like it seems ridiculous to the average person. They're freaking shorts. But
No, but when there are toxic beliefs that are layered on, in your life. Like, it's the same thing of you and I just saying, I didn't even know what I liked. Like, I mean, I was in my 30s and I didn't even know if I personally liked red wine or not. I'm sure some people hear that story and they're like, wow, that's a
Yeah.
lot. And I'm like, I know, like it's a lot, but it's the same thing with your shorts, right? You're like, I put them on, I tried this thing, like nothing major happened. I wore some shorts and nobody stared at me. It was fine.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. What's one, my last question for you is, what is one question that you would ask you if you were me that I have not asked you?
Ooh. Maybe how does infidelity affect your sexual relationship?
Oof. Yes. Such a good question. All right, go for it.
And wow, it it took a lot of rebuilding in our marriage to establish trust, to be able to get to a place of even emotional intimacy again.
Yeah.
And for a very long time, like I think we just didn't really have sex because we were trying to figure out like how do we rebuild our marriage? How do we rebuild trust? Because for us, sex was very emotional and physical. And it took a really long time to get to a place where I think that we felt comfortable coming together in that way again.
Mhm.
But it is a journey, funny enough, that I wouldn't want to play out in a different way. And my husband and I always talk about this. I'm like, you know, I do believe that I was called back into existence way before my rock bottom moment. Like I do believe the universe was like, Liesl, like change this thing, do this differently, like think about this differently, or True North or whoever. But this was the journey that I needed to be sitting in this seat right now. And I'm in a place of health emotionally, and like the physical healing is now starting to fold in. And so my relationship with my husband is like a real relationship. Like I don't actually know if we had a real relationship before. Can you have a relationship with someone who doesn't know who they are? I don't think you can.
Mhm.
So we had to basically, very similar to what you said about after all of your church hurt, our lives were like rubble. And we had to figure out, like, as we climb out of this and we figure out who we are sexually, emotionally, in our relationship, we both have the right at any point to say this isn't what we want for our lives anymore. And I think that was very freeing too, for both of us to be able to say that to each other.
Like to say, we don't have to be married. Like it's a choice that we're making. We're choosing to be in this. Yeah.
And I will not belabor this point too much, but I think that's another mistake we make about marriage. Like, I believe that in marriage, we oftentimes lean on, well, it's till death do us part. So we don't work on things a lot of the times, right? It can make us lazy. And I really do believe that at any given point in time, like you have the freedom to make a different choice. And I know that's a very weird thing to say out loud, but it is truly what I believe. Like, yes, like I am married, but my husband and I have this belief that like if we grow or evolve or change so much past each other, that like it's gonna be okay. Like we are whole all by ourselves. And that is the most freeing thing. I know that's a True North thing that I'm saying out loud, but then I feel the shame of like, but Liesl, like marriage is till death do us part. Like you're gonna be with Harlan and when you're in, the nursing home or whatever. but I know in the core of who I am that I am fully alive in myself. And I want my husband to be in that place too. And if he gets to a place where he is not fully alive, being with me, I want him to make a different choice. I really do. And I want him to grant that to me as well, because that's beautiful. That's real love, right? Like that's actually loving someone. It's wanting them to be fully alive.
Hells yeah.
Yeah.
You couldn't have put that better. I'm very aware that for me to know that somebody loves me and they're choosing to be in a relationship with me, whether it's my husband or my children or anybody else, it has to be equally as okay for them not to, which is fucking terrifying.
Right?
Terrifying. And yet, it's also the most stable base. Like you said, knowing that you are whole within yourself and that you are choosing to be in this relationship today and that it's always your choice. That's like the most stable way to have a relationship. And to know that your partner is choosing to be with you, that it's not I don't want somebody to be with me out of obligation. Hells no. If you don't want to be in this relationship with me, then see you later. Like, I don't know. I don't want that. I don't want somebody to have to be in a relationship with me. That's horrible. So I don't know. I just love the way you put it. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's still fucking terrifying.
Yep.
It is.
Can you briefly mention a couple of things that you guys did to rebuild trust? Were there like specific physical things or?
So there were, okay. So when I tell this story out loud, I think I'm afraid of what people think. Isn't that
Mhm.
funny? Sometimes even I still am afraid of what people think. And
Of
I feel
course.
really damn whole. But in the beginning, like Harlan really did have access to like my phone, my
Mhm.
passwords, my email. And that was in the beginning. Like we knew that wasn't going to last forever, right? Like when we were talking with our therapist, she was like, well, you know, Harlan, what do you need to rebuild trust with Liesl? And he's like, I just need access to her things.
Yep.
And I remember at the time feeling like a little bit stifled by that. But then I was like, at the end of the day, trust has been broken. So repairing it is going to be upping the level of visibility to my husband about the things that I'm doing.
Yep.
And when I understood it that way and I tried to put myself in his shoes, like I started to say, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that was a really important part of rebuilding our trust, was me saying I was going to be where I said I was going to be. It was checking in with him more regularly than what I would have. And then like that eventually transitioned into like, it was baby steps, because it took me a lot of steps to get to the place where I'm having an affair. And so it wasn't going to be fixed overnight.
Yep.
So it was those little moments of rebuilding trust. And over, 5 years, eventually getting to the place where he's just like, okay, good. I'm like, I'm going out. He's like, great.
Yeah.
See you later. Like, have a great night. I'll check in with me around 10 or whatever, like it's just very different. It was that way though sexually too. But I feel that was a little bit different just because I was so like, there are so many toxic truths that layered into my sexuality that we just basically started completely from ground zero there.
Yep.
And I'm
What?
still working through that part.
Yep.
Yep.
Which was ground zero was like making out.
Yes. Yeah. We didn't even do like, I don't know, like when it was on my to-do list, I just didn't ever, we didn't really even make out, like it's just it's a thing that had to get done. And now it's not, like, it's just not at all.
Now it's something you want.
It's weird. Weird.
Yeah, right.
Oh, look, we're allowed to be sexual goddesses.
What? That's so crazy.
Stop it.
Oh, yes. I relate to that for sure. Cool. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared today. I've loved it. I know my listeners will love it. It's such a juicy interview. I have a
Thanks
lot
for
of
having
quotable
me.
quotes for this interview.
I'm
To
glad
go
you
through
have
and
some
like
quotable quotes.
pick out all the quotes. Yeah. Mm. Okay.
So I will have to tell you, and then I will let you go. But this is by far like the hardest podcast that I like ramped myself up for, because I feel very comfortable talking about like my rock bottom moments, like rising above that, because I'm still in the process of healing my physical self. It's like a little bit more vulnerable
Totally.
and scary. And then there's also this part of me that, like, there's this, there's the shame over here, and then there's like true north, real feeling and alignment. There's still this part of me where it's like women aren't supposed to talk about sex like this.
Right?
Right? Which is so
Totally.
ridiculous and not true. Like, that is a stupid truth.
Yes. And I love that you brought your vulnerability to this and like your whole selfness because
Yes.
it's true. It can be really uncomfortable to talk about sex and sexuality, which is why I want to have this podcast. Like that's part of the whole purpose of it is to bring conversations about this out into the world so that it's not as crazy, so that people do talk about it more, so people know that they're not alone. Like you and I today, it was like everything was like, ah, me too, ah, me too. And that's so affirming.
Yes.
And it takes away some of the shame to realize, oh, I'm not alone. This is normal what I'm going through.
Totally. It does take away the shame, because so often it's like when we're steeped in shame, we stay in our own little shame spiral, because like saying it out loud is a fear that someone else is not going to resonate, or that
Yeah.
they're going to think you're weird or whatever it is. But the reality is that, like, that's how we actually connect with people, when
Yeah.
we're real about our stories. And it's not just emotional stories, it is sexual stories. So anyway, you taught me that today and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, it's all of our stories. And like we mentioned before, it all goes hand in hand.
totally.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's a good place to end.
Yes. Thank you so much for the chat. I super appreciate it.
Thank you too.